Sanket Patil. He does many things. He has a PhD in data science and he works at a startup. He also writes a lot on different subjects, and he writes both in Kannada and English, and he runs a magazine for Noru. So that's Sanket Patil. Manisha Chaudhary, all the way from Delhi. Manisha is an award-winning translator, super editor, and we have had the pleasure of working together at Pratham Books for over a decade. Manisha Chaudhary, she runs the bookmark at Jaipur Lit Fest, among many other things. Recently, she's been on the jury for the selection of the best books in Hindi for organizations like Room to Read and Tata Trust, Barat. She has been editing and writing for long, and we are looking forward to listening to her talk about her biggest passion, books for children, especially in their mother tongue. Pavitra Umashankar has experience working with children as a Teach for India Fellow. She's worked with children from classes 1 to 7. She has also helped to curate books for them, design reading sessions for them, and later as a senior program manager at Room to Read, she has curated many writing workshops, including those with teachers. So she's also an avid mountaineer. Welcome, all of you. First of all, literature for young minds, is it any different from literature for adults? Literature is literature, and I think we all start, the best place to start is when the child is really young. Talk to them, read to them, and I think that's where literature takes birth. What would you say?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having me here. So, literature for young minds. I sort of want to, break it into two parts. And then also maybe try and talk a little bit about the role of literature and especially when it comes to young minds. As I was thinking about this and thinking what I should be talking about, I was reminded of a book I read a few years ago. It's an Italian author called Italo Calvino, and the book basically, it's called 6 Memos for the Next Millennium. And very interestingly, this is a series of lectures Calvin had prepared for the young minds of his time, right? And where he essentially wanted to talk about the future of literature, its relevance, right? And he says something very interesting. What he says is that he talks about the unique capacity of literature, right? What is unique about literature as an art, right? And he also talks about certain peculiar features of literature that not only make it relevant, but he also talks about what are those features or what are those peculiar aspects of literature that are required to make literature relevant for people and especially young people. So the 6 memos basically he talks about something like lightness, right? He talks about quickness. He talks about consistency. He talks about he talks about something around concreteness or exactitude, and he talks about something literature as being visible, right? Now, as I was thinking about this, I thought this describes good literature anyway, but then this this also describes young minds very well, right? With these sort of these peculiar features or these aspects, right? And this also describes perhaps the kind of literature that young minds look forward to, that engages them. When we talk about lightness, it's as opposed to heaviness, in the sense of heavy in terms of, it could be in terms of language, it could be in terms of, bringing in too much abstraction, right? Similarly, when we talk about quickness, it's quickness in terms of pace as well as quickness of, when we tell children stories, they make connections so quickly. So there's also that quickness of making a lot of different connections. And exactitude, children, and I mean, young minds, it's not just children, but children or younger people. Instead of abstract concepts, they like concrete things. They know the name of a certain dinosaur, right? They know things, they call them by their names. Everything is concrete, right? So essentially, the role of literature basically is to sort of perhaps continue to inculcate these kind of features, right, and make it more relevant for young minds. And the other thing that probably what we often when we look at literature for younger people, there is sometimes a tendency to dumb down things, right? But I think there's a lot of complexity that young minds can handle, and there's a lot of nuance that they can handle. So I think we need to sort of consider all of those aspects. Maybe let me pause there and then we can maybe revisit.
Thank you. Yes, so children, young people can handle a lot of complexities. And that's why we start for children when they're very young with picture books that are very simple, in the sense that it is about their world, a child's world, their family, the surroundings, their bodies, their hands and legs, and things like that. So we start with that, the primary things that they see, the earth, the sun, not the earth, the sun, the moon, the soil, the birds, bees, and the butterflies. And from there on, as the child grows, we have to add much more complex things if we want to hold their attention on reading and literature. Manisha, you've worked for such a long time in children's books, and you have helped produce, publish, create children's books for children of all ages. What would you say is the most important thing that we need to keep in mind when we either give access to books to children or get them books, probably as parents, as friends, relatives, when we buy books for children? So what do you think a good children's book would have?
Okay, so I'm going to flip this around completely. I really want to sort of zoom out and look at the word literature in our topic. I think literature for young minds, or literature for old minds, or people in general, is that piece of work which actually tickles the affective domain of my mind. Only that qualifies as literature as far as I'm concerned. And because consistency, exactitude, concreteness, etc. are very much embedded in the world of education in any case, which the child is willy-nilly going to be blooded into once he enters the stream of education. It is only the domain of literature which is that little space that is available to that young mind to explore the affective domain of his or her mind. And to me, that is a very critical space. It is a small space, unfortunately. Like you said, that how do we give books? Which language do we give books in? Should it be picture books? Should it be chapter books? Whatever. All those sort of logistical details of how we make literature available to children is one aspect of why we should have literature for young minds. But I think we really need to look at why have literature at all. And just like we think that it is important to be a feeling individual in today's society, the very first exposure to be able to feel in a universe which is beyond their immediate universe, even if it's a picture book and it's describing the birds and bees that you see around them, it should actually evoke a feeling if it's a children's book. Unless they will become aware of the beauty of that bird or that bee or whatever it is, or you become aware of your place in that larger universe. We were looking at climate fiction in the earlier panel. It is actually not then serving the purpose of what a children's book should do. It is not merely to inform. It is not merely to concretize. It is not merely to say that these are good things to know or think about. It is actually to be able to feel that bird and bee somewhere in your universe. It is the ability to have a reflective conversation about why? Why on earth should I be reading about X, Y, or Z? Or when Mala writes her books which are pure fantasy, where she's going off to Hampi and doing time travel and whatever. So why is it important to do that? It's important to do that because it gives you the space to reflect on your life. And life is tough. I'm sure a lot of you agree at some level. When you're being honest at night, life is tough. So when life is tough, it is only that time at night when you're able to be by yourself and you're able to reflect upon the day's happenings, or you're able to reflect upon what happened to you. It is literature which gives you that little space where you can think about how else could I have done it. Was it okay to do it like this? How did I feel? Why did I feel terrible when that boy bullied me? So it is really that. Does it give you the vocabulary? Does it give you the space to explore those places? If it's doing that, it's literature for young minds. If it's not doing that, it's okay. It's good printed work. It's probably useful. But I really would not call it, I would not call it useful literature if it's not tickling the feeling places in my mind.
We have many books that tickle our the brain, and in that we are lucky to have so many writers around us, so many books around us. Even this venue is full of books, and which means that, as I said, we are very lucky, we are fortunate. But there are hundreds, millions of children who do not have access to books, and they still need this. And they still need this escape into a world where they're learning without being taught. They're learning just by reading, observing, thinking for themselves, coming up with questions on their own based on what they're reading. So this access is not there for a lot of children. I think Pavitra will be able to tell us a little about her experience with children, both as a Teach for India fellow and in your position at Room to Read. How did you engage children, and how did you ensure they had books that they could feel a part of? So if you take a book, a popular book from here and give it to a child who's never heard of all those things, I don't know whether they'll enjoy it that much. So how did you ensure they had books that they could, sort of relate to?
Thanks, Mala, and glad to be part of this panel discussion. So access to books is a challenge, more so in low-income private schools or government schools. Not that government doesn't have policies, there are various policies. Implementation is a challenge, as we all know. There are library grants which are given to schools through which they can procure books. Now the question is, what kind of books should be procured for children? So there's a big lag there because the teachers themselves are not sure what kind of books are suitable for children. Should it be dictionary? I have 10,000 in my kitty for library. Should I just get a couple of dictionaries and close it off? Or is there anything else that I can explore? So that advocacy is needed at various levels, starting from higher government officials. I'm talking about government schools in specific because I've worked with them. I've worked at the grassroots level. So that advocacy at various levels is very important, starting from maybe an IAS officer to to a government official, to somebody who's working in Samagra Shikshana, to a government teacher. So the whole cycle has to fall in place. And how do children, to come to your question of how do children take the books, children, whether irrespective of the economic background, I think everybody, irrespective of the economic background, are drawn to stories. So stories are something which really attract them. And when we talk about books, especially children literature, there are books which are mirrors, there are books which are windows. So mirrors are something which is a self-reflection. So when their stories are being told in books, the delight on the children's face is something very different, because, oh, my story is also important. This is something which I also happen to, live in my daily life. There are also window books which takes them to the world which is very different from their own, and also gives exposure to things. So it also brings that, I think it's a great equalizer, if you say the books are a great equalizer, and they get to explore a lot of topics irrespective of which school, which background they come from.
That's lovely. So yes, books are a great equalizer. I will take it with, I'm not totally agreeing to that, because there are so many different kinds of books, so many different kinds of people, so many different kinds of children, so many kinds of human beings. And our emotions, our baggage, our experiences are so different that not all of us can appreciate the same book. So what I consider a great book may be totally something that Sanket will say no. So there lies a problem. I think there's a small problem there, because what do you put into a book so that, see, as a writer, I want my books to be read, right? I am thinking of children. I want them to be very happy reading my book. I want them to feel safe reading about things in my book. I want them to be inspired. So many different things go into that little wanting when you're starting out to write. And yet, I think what really is important is, like what Manisha said, the book, the story has to tickle the brain. How do we do that? How do we do that in a world where the children are drawn to so many different things? And would you say children are reading less or not? I know you have a strong view on this.
Children reading less. If yes, that is only because the parents are reading less. The school teachers are reading less. The community is reading less. So it is nothing to do with children per se, right? As recently in the UK, I visited some bookstores, huge bookstores. I could spend weeks together there. And I saw many parents coming with their children there. And the children were talking about serious, not just talking about children's books, of course, they had those, but then they're also picking up serious books on poetry and novels and so on. Now, unless that culture of reading is developed and sustained, children will probably read lesser. So it is family, it is schools, it is communities. We have all of these, so many children's parks and playgrounds. Why can we not have a small library attached to each one of those? Right? It's leisure anyway. So you go, you play. You can also read a book. You can spend time there. A lot can happen. Now, but this was answering the premise that assuming that children are reading less. But to flip it in some way, I don't think that is the case also. Right? It's like see the number of people who read, and who read and who continue to read beyond a certain age, outside of what is prescribed in the curricula and so on, has always been a minority in any generation. Right? It's every generation thinks that civilization sort of ended with theirs and then it's all anarchy after that and so on. But when I actually believe the opposite. I have great, I actually believe that my generation is the worst and there's probably better things coming in the future. But that aside, see, I think there is, yes, I mean, the reason why it appears so is that when we were growing up, the little else in terms of, call it distraction, call it entertainment, whatever it is, right? I mean, even television, for some of us, it came fairly late, actually, right? Now, of course, there are devices, and then everybody uses them. Parents, grandparents, children, everybody uses them. But still, I do see that children read. There are, and I see a lot of children reading a lot. And the way it probably works is that, if I take my own example, I am on, social media. I do. Sometimes it feels like a, scrolling to doom. But at the same time, I also, can take long walks listening to podcasts that are endless, like 4 hours, 6 hours, and so on. And I can, and then I can read a book. Right? I see many children being able to do that also. Right? And I think as long as we are exposing them to different kinds of books, different kinds of literature, and as long as we don't go overboard with sanitizing and gatekeeping, they will, develop, and they will continue reading. I think, and see what's also happening is this, right? If you look at our schools, languages have been relegated. Basically, it's like we use this term called scope, right? This has scope, and this what that means is that you can't earn money, with that later on, basically, right? Or good money, whatever that good money is, right? And then languages. If languages themselves are at that stage, we forget the fact. The irony is that anything that we do happens in language ultimately. But then even then we think that languages aren't that important, and then literature even less so. And then we start dividing these neat silos. We want our right from middle school we want our children to start preparing for JEE or whatever other exam. Absolutely nothing wrong with it if that's what the parents and the children want. There's no value judgment that I'm placing there. But as a result, what ends up happening is that somehow it's like we have created these, complete, silos in which there is humanities, there is commerce, there is arts, and those who do well in a certain class, regardless of what their interests are, they go to science stream, and then who goes to humanities, basically it has nothing to do with interest. It is basically everything is based on what, and that is the strangest thing, right? But then that is the reality we live in, and something worse that happens, and the biggest problem that we have is we have very few good real universities. When I say real universities, the whole idea of university is exchange of ideas across different disciplines and so on. What we are hell-bent on is creating more IITs and more highly specialized schools instead of creating a more cohesive, more collaborative sort of a lot of sort of spaces. And once somebody enters this science and engineering, it's then humanities taken out of them. Yeah, I mean it's like the exception proving the norm basically. Right? It's like Pavitra was saying whenever she finds any IT person coming to any of these events, she's like almost shocked basically. So the long and short of it is that we have created these strange silos, and what we're forgetting is that. Another value that I wanted to talk about earlier, and which is probably now is the right time anyways, is multiplicity. Multiplicity of literature, multiplicity of us as humans. A child does not decide on day one that this is what I am going to be. And even if that is the case, it does not negate the possibility of being a host of any number of other things, right? Just by deciding that I want to be an engineer does not mean that I'll never be a reader or a writer or somebody who's interested in art or whatever else. But we somehow seem to think like that, and if our children are behaving in that manner, or if it is just a reflection of what we have been doing, and unless we start acting, we say it takes a village to raise a child, so we need to wisen up as a village and start doing better.
Time for all of us to wisen up, like you say, and start raising children as happy readers, as not readers who have to do it as a task, not as readers who have to write a review after they finish their storybook from that they got from the school library, not as something to be done when they don't go there, sit and read, not like that, but I think the joy of them picking up a book of their choice and reading it any way they want, last page first page last, whatever. So that is joyful learning, and Manisha has done a lot for that. She's one of the founding members of Buckaroo Literature Festival, and she was also the one who introduced for JLF, Jaipur Literature Fest, the festival where it went to schools, the outreach program. So through this program, I think publishers, storytellers were able to go to schools all across the city and spend many joyful hours with children to do with books. They just told stories, did art, and all of this was through a book. Would you like to add more to this?
Yeah, so just like it is important to understand why literature should be important for all of us. Since Pavitra has already pointed out that access is important, the whole business of diversity is very important. Just like we have the choice as an adult to pretty much do what we like, we can visit an art exhibition versus coming to Samajamukhi Literature Festival versus doing whatever else I like. With a child, there's a lot of gatekeeping. So it is only when you have a diverse set of books available for a child to be able to choose independently, that is when the likelihood of them becoming self-motivated readers becomes higher. So that only happens when you sort of make the whole idea glamorous, that reading is glamorous, it is fun for so many reasons. So when we used to do the Buckaroo outreach as well, we used to talk about this whole business of reading has to be marketed like ice cream, not like green vegetables. So green vegetables are a desirable thing to do, but if ice cream is self-motivated, you don't have to persuade people to have ice cream. So if you have such sessions where the children have a lot of fun and they have the autonomy to pick up the book or not pick up the book, to instead of, like you said, begin at the beginning or not begin at the beginning, or say that this aeroplane doesn't look correct to me and I'm going to draw it another way, or I don't like the ending of this book, or if I finish the book, I want to sit and talk about it, and you say shush, go to class. So if you take away some of those constraints and you trust the children to have an intelligent discussion because they are perfectly capable of reflecting on whatever has happened, if the book and the story has some power as a medium in that particular vehicle or format, and you give them the space to talk about it, they will definitely be more attracted to the idea, because it is, at the end of it, as all human beings, we all want autonomy in our lives. So why do we expect anything different from our children? And we have to trust them with that autonomy. We are very worried as adults that unless we control the entire environment, they are going to go bad. They will become bad children, they will have bad morals, they will not learn how to write properly or whatever. Whatever is the concern that adult that has at any particular age bracket, we simply lather it onto the children. We just assume that they have no agency of their own to think about what they want to do, and it's not, unless it's guided by you, it's not going to go in the right direction. In most cases, if you spend time with the child and you have a conversation which does not dumb down the child, and you're not talking down to the child, and you're allowing her to express whatever it is that she thinks about or feels about, she's going to enjoy the activity of reading. And if Sanket he might like aeroplanes because he's an engineer, and I went to humanities fortunately. My times were simpler then, and nobody thought I was dumb. So, so if all these constraints are taken away, I mean, what you were describing was how this system is made in such a way that autonomy is compromised simply because everybody needs to have scope and be able to earn a living. So the scope for creativity is constrained. So if we are able, at least in the middle school years or in the early years, create situations where there is freedom for the child to choose, and there is diversity of books on offer, I see no reason at all why children will not become readers. And as far as this lazy statement about, oh, children don't read, they're always on their devices. I mean, storytelling is device agnostic. Maybe they'll be reading on their phones, maybe they'll be reading not only paper books. Though personally, I would advocate that in the primary years, the paper book is very important because it engages your five senses, and that is, that first ownership of the story in a vehicle which is time tested, which is the paper book, is very important. Once the child is old enough to have discernment, then you can be device agnostic. You can read it in any way you like. I don't care, because you're already hooked to the act of reading. Right? Once that has happened, then the whole business of being self-directed in your interests, that becomes a possibility. Otherwise, you're in a regimented environment where you're expected to do X or Y, where some adult somewhere has decided that you have to be molded according to the system, instead of the system having the openings for you to be able to express your individual needs, desires, etc., etc. We're always going to have this tension. But that does not mean that as adults, as publishers, or as writers, we do not kind of strive to do the best kind of storytelling. We try to be as creative in our presentations as possible, and we do not sanitize. He also mentioned the word sanitize, where we don't assume that complexity belongs only to the minds of the adults, and children are not able to handle it. That's simply not true, in my opinion.
Okay, confession time. In public, I'm going to confess. Okay. Okay. So when I love telling stories to children, and sometimes I do the stupid thing of taking out a book which I have not read before and start reading it. So when I was reading this to a child, and I came to a lovely story, nice things and all that, and then the last bit, and then he killed it. My God, there were 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds in front of me, and I was telling them this story, and I had just used the kill word. Here I am, a totally anti-war, anti-killing, non-violent kind of person, and I felt so bad that I said this. And then I realized that, the Ramayana and Mahabharata and our Panchatantra are full of good people, bad people, and killing the bad ones. Such a simple way of life. Acha kiya to let them lead. If they did something wrong, kill them, behead them, drop them in frying oil, whatever. So I think we all grew up with those stories, and I think we've come out sane. But now, in this world where everything you say and everything you do is out there in the public in some form or the other, I think now I feel a bit scared to go there. And so when I had a chance to do it, I sanitize it. So instead of the bad guy killing the good guy, I make it up and say the bad guy and the good guy, they became friends, they discussed, and then, all that. So peace, Nobel Peace Prize for someone. What do you think? I think you've dealt with children who are, who are seeing the world as it is at a very young age. They are seeing things which some of us try to protect our children from. And how do stories help them? And what is the role of the black and white and no grays in between?
So children are exposed to a lot of stuff, like you said, and it's not that they are waiting for us to tell what is right or what is wrong. By basic instinct, they know what is right, what is wrong, but they are put through situations where they might not be in their best behavior every time. And it's important to tell them that it's okay not to be in your best behavior all the time. It's very situational. What is important is you respond to a situation rather than react to a situation. So it's important to create that atmosphere saying, okay, there's a good guy, there's a bad guy, the bad guy gets killed in the end all the time. There are stories like that, but it is also necessary to tell students, tell children that there are grey areas, and it's okay that you don't express happy emotions every time. You are a human, so you have anger, you have frustration, you have sadness. So all sorts of stories have to be expressed to children. But having said that, teachers have a very important role to play, I feel, in a way of opening up the discussion, where children don't feel scared to say that at this point I was not in my best behavior because I felt so and so. So they should be able to express that emotion. So when that free atmosphere is created in the classroom, that open discussion is created in the classroom, that's when you don't have to put effort exclusively to teach morals to children. Just open up the discussion and they know what is right, what is wrong. They have access to the internet, they have access to a very fast world. So we cannot create two alternate worlds for children where one area they have access to every information on the planet, and in another world we are trying to create a very ideal setup for them. So they know that, okay, this is not true. This is just happening in the stories, and this is the moral of the story which I am learning. So we strongly, at least in Room to Read, when we established libraries for children, we used to tell teachers saying, don't preach morals exclusively to children. Instead, open up the discussion to them. The teachers need to have a mindset shift themselves to open up that discussion and say, okay, what do you feel? Why do you think the character did like this? If you were in the situation, what you would have done? And why did you not like this character in the story? It's okay if you don't like the story. What is the reason why you didn't like the story? So such kind of discussions have to be opened up, and that's where the literature plays such an important role. Like Manisha ma'am mentioned, it tickles the affective part of your brain. So that is critical thinking. That's how the critical thinkers are born.
So thank you. So that's the role of fiction in our lives. Fiction helps the real world, and that's why we need to encourage. That's why we need to have books around us which are of different kinds, so that children can dip into each or different ones and sort of experience different worlds in their own space, in their own while they are comfortably safe in their own worlds. Manisha, I'm going to ask you something, and that is, with so many books around, how do we pick out good books? I'm asking you this because you've recently been on the panel of several awards where you got to read a lot of books. Are there books coming out which are pushing the boundaries, pushing the envelope?
So I can speak from the recent experience of having looked at a fair number of Hindi children's books which were submitted for the 2 prizes, and I am very pleasantly surprised to say, I'm very pleased to say, that they really are pushing the boundaries, and across age groups. They are touching upon topics which again would be considered hot or sensitive or whatever. And I just want to add here that it's not entirely related to this answer, but it's burning in my brain right now. It's that I think the importance of fantasy in a child's life is absolutely critical. And somehow fantasies picked up this bad odor somewhere along the way that, oh, realism is everything and whatever, but it is fantasy which allows the brain the relief to work out solutions which don't seem logical. And life is not always logical. And also for the child, it is the safe space of fantasy which gives a breathing space when life is too much. So some of those books that I'm referring to by publishers such as Muskan, NGOs that work with children in difficult circumstances, they are being encouraged to write, and with a bit of editing they are bringing out very low cost black and white books, but they are written by the children who are on the street very often. and they mention something like where railway station पे भीख मांगने गया था, and it's just presented as a very matter of fact sentence somewhere in the plot of the book, and then it's actually a ghost story. It's a small ghost story where he went to beg near the railway station. On the way back, it was very dark near the railway tracks. He felt that some shadow was following him, etc. So he started to run. And then he bumped into some didi who said, "What's happened to you?" So he says, "Mujhe bahut bhook lagi hai," and he has a plate of chow mein and he feels better. And he thinks that somebody is chasing him because the coins that he had been given as a beggar were going chan 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 in his pocket. So that, in a nutshell, that is the story. But the fact that it presented this child as कि मैं वहाँ पे भीख मांगने गया था is the most normal thing in the world. So as a jury, we really had an argument about this, that no, we cannot promote begging. It's not promoting begging. It's written by a child who begs. Every now and then he has to beg because that's his life. Or he goes to the kura kadir and picks up garbage and so on. So it's about how he learned how to pick garbage, he learned how to separate it, he learned what was valuable, he learned what rotted fast, etc., etc. So that's all real life knowledge. We just don't call it knowledge because it's not taught in a classroom. So, which is valorizing life experience of a child and giving it value. So a lot of Hindi publishers, especially Iktara, Muskan, this one, Blue Prakashan, to some extent, sometimes Tulika also, they are tackling very gritty topics in a very sort of very fine, subtle, with a soft touch, basically. So I think it is all really about the soft touch and how you present that theme and how you don't make a big deal of it. Again, because it's all our adult biases which come from, where if we sort of begin to look at it as something too hot to handle, then obviously our attempts will be clumsy probably. But when it's presented in a way which is very natural to the surroundings, it is an entirely credible work. So for any story to succeed, you create a credible universe. So if the credible universe is working as a story, whether it's an adult story or a child story, it works. So I do think that some of that is happening. There were stories about communalism, for example, which had real life testimonies of people who had been displaced because of communal riots in Bhopal. And what happened to that neighborhood? So, the children experienced that fear, they had to move from one place to another, they had to go without food for a night, and so on and so forth. So all that is there, and because it is so authentic, it never crossed my mind that this is not suitable for children, because it was about those children. So I think we have to constantly understand that complexity does not necessarily mean it's not a taboo, or those taboos have to be constantly questioned by us, so that we can understand presentation better, we understand the light touch better, we can understand the subtleties of emotion which should be primary in that book rather than the events which disturb us as adults. I think once we kind of get a better understanding of it ourselves, we are more open to creating those kinds of books for children. That's what I thought.
So we need books that are real, that are written by people from different backgrounds, and it's good to read books written by different authors, coming from different areas, different regions, and that is where language comes into. So either in translation or, if possible, in the original. It's good to read in different formats, different languages, so that we gain more realities probably. Should I open it out to the group now? I'd like you to ask me questions, ask any of us questions now. We've talked about children's books, we've talked about literature being important for all of us because it opens up different parts of our brain, and now we'd like to take questions.
Environment and POSCO acts related, sex education and all. Nowadays it is open, and the government of India also doing in that good this one. As far as literature is concerned, corruption is a major this one, and we don't have a age. 9 months old to 90 years people will be killed on the road and some accidents. All behind this is corruption, big stories. None of the school. And government, madam also explained there will be some government restrictions is there to how to bring it to the child. This is how the panel has to think and produce some books on this area so that children can understand at the initial level itself, especially in the modern schools, people are very attractive to those topics as far as my this one experience is concerned. So why now can't you are not bringing such kind of books in from certain age groups?
So you're saying a book about corruption okay, specific to children. Okay. So I think one reason is that if it's in fiction, and it's happened a lot, in many of the books which are written as stories, there is an amount of corruption being shown. In a sense, the bad guy or the bad person will also be the corrupt one. So children are learning about corruption and how it is being tackled. But I think what you mean is just like how there are books on sex education, there should be one on corruption, right?
It is just, for example, if I give a live example, Artigo. Artigo is giving a license to the masses. Okay, how we are going to, children has to understand, tomorrow road people are dying and the environment, birds are killed, a lot of IT companies are built, demolishing them, various, Bangalore, I took a photograph on that, birds are dying because of environment has lost to build making GPA and all.
Yeah.
What
So
is the use? These things you have to bring it to the children in young minds. So that the correction will happen, also ministers will be attracted to these topics.
Okay, so in my recent book, I'm happy to give an example. In my recent book, The Missing Rocks of Hampi, there is corruption. There is, you read about who is corrupt, why they are corrupt, and what they did, and that happens in the book. Oh, thank you. So this is, see, the reason is many of these topics, corruption at the RTO level is an adult thing. You have to be 16 to get a learner's license. So you have time, you can talk about that only later. But any other thing can be tackled. Anything else, we can definitely tackle. Any other questions?
Thank you for an engaging discussion. I just had a query in the fact that I see it to make the process of reading enjoyable, to make it more delightful, joyful and things like that. But it also comes back to me as somebody who is teaching quite a bit of young minds. How do we ask them to move to probably a next stage? I don't see it as a linear stage, but there is also a hard fought read. There are also books that where we have to sit for hours together. It does not come very easy. How do we then push our younger ones towards something like that? That has been one challenge. I see my students, a lot of them actually read quite a bit of adult fictions, young fictions, pulp fictions, and all of those nice ones they read. But the moment it becomes too hard for readings that must be captured over time, then there is a lot of hesitancy from their behalf. So how do we then engage with our students, with our friends from the younger knowledge?
So here's a parent speaking, so let's.
Yeah, so it is a challenge, of course, but so I'm going to say a few things from my personal experience and then see if it brings to that, right? So I have a 14-year-old and an 8-year-old daughter, 14-year-old daughter and 8-year-old son. From time to, I mean, of course, they read books and so on and different kinds of books, but from time to time, I read to them even now, right? And when I read to them, a lot of times I read whatever I have been reading, right? So recently, to give a few examples from recent, I recently read this very intense story from Sardas and Manto, Toba Takes It, to both my children. and each one probably got something out of it in their own way. This is exactly how I myself started reading. Like, at least, thankfully, when I started reading, my parents, probably, I don't know, they didn't think to divide it as children's books, non-children's book, age appropriate or whatever. So, I was reading, Chekhov's Boys, I was reading Kuempu, I was reading Tejasvi, and I was reading Tolstoy, and a lot of other stuff at the same time. To give some more examples, there is this Polish writer called Slavoj Rozak, and recently there is this book called The Elephant. Each story is just about 3-4 pages. It's biting satire. It's set in a communist dictatorial regime. I read many of those stories to my 8-year-old son, and he laughed, and he was so delighted. He obviously does not get the politics of it, but it has characters that are animals, that are anti-establishment. There's a lot of fun in all of that. I think we need to, the point I'm trying to make is that there's always going to be that challenge, but we'll have to find probably different ways of engaging, and there's a lot of effort to be put as well.
Just to add to what Sanket said, so reading is a process, as we all know. It doesn't come in a day or anything like that. It's a process. So for young children, when we ask them to read something, so the text should be such that it is not too hard for them that they lose interest, or it should not be too easy for them that they finish it in 10 minutes and put the book down and now they don't know what to do with it. So it has to be at an appropriate reading level, we say. So when we say reading level, it's not necessarily just putting the aksharas together and then making a sentence. It's also about comprehension. So we have to increase the difficulty level of the text as well as the abstractness of the text also. So as in when the child grows, the abstractness of the text has to increase so that everything is not crystal clear, everything is not preached. They learn to read between lines. But having said that, each child will have a different interest. So whatever interests me might not interest another child at all. When I used to read to my daughter, so there was this rhyming book which I have read like hundreds of times to her, and she never got tired of it, and finally I had to give it to my nephew saying, okay, this is a gift from your sister. So you never, and he has not even opened the book. She used to love it and he has never opened the book at all, whereas he also loves reading. So you never know what will interest a child. What is important is to get them to inculcate that habit so that they can carry on from there. So first they have to get a hang of it, and till then you'll have to support them. They need to have those positive influences in life, and once they get a hang of it, they will take off from there, is what I believe.
Thank you very much. Anyone?
I just wanted to take off from Manisha's point, where, or rather Mada's point, where now many publishers are, Manisha's point, where a lot of publishers are now, actually like Tulita has now recently brought out on exploring disability, and there are 3 books on that. And I'm glad I've learned now about Taran, and I shall look out for their books and see if we can, But the interesting thing is, I wonder whether many of these books, I mean, I'm talking from the space of disability and we have been wanting to do this, go to sort of schools where, children don't have at least such exposure to these realities. I wonder how people would understand these kind of books.
Different books for different.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, मैं भीख मांगने गया था railway station पे. Suppose I was to take you to a Sant Valley school or the Valley school here, or even one of the sort of. Well, how would it be understood? Again, as adults, we have discomfort with open-endedness, which is our discomfort, not the children's. So let's not put it on them, let's not project it onto them. a good book, in my opinion, especially in an institutional setup such as a school, is one which opens up the space for conversation at the end of that lectionary period, or if you have like a book discussion space, or you have like a beer time, etc., where there is the possibility of talking about that. And I would risk it, even if a Vasant Valley kid didn't quite understand the Samajamukhi, which I don't believe is true, because he, in his car window at the red light, he sees children begging. So it's like, how much do we want to sanitize their world and pretend that things don't exist? And as I wanted to also respond to you, you use words like push. Let's not push. Let's trust. I think it's very important to trust children. You lead them with the books, you assist them as needed, you read out as needed, etc. But if some children don't read, it's fine. So it's like you have to be okay with the fact that you put not everybody has to read. Some children will read, some children will read at a time when you're least expecting it. Some children will think about the begging child and talk about it maybe a year later, saying, yeah, I read that in that book one time, etc., etc. So it's like your business is to put out as diverse a list as possible.
That's what I read about sensitizing children to their realities, because parents already insulate them in all sort of ways. Children go to these sort of schools.
Absolutely. So the whole business of literature is to sensitize you to people and ways of being which are not your own. So like she mentioned, windows and Gandhi quote, mirrors and windows, where in the initial years you see your own world reflected back in the child's book, and that strengthens her self-identity. Thereafter you give them books about things which are completely different from their worlds, because they need to know that there are many worlds out there, and everybody has a right to enjoy their aloo puri or their equivalent wherever they are, or go out to their grandfather and have fun, etc., etc. So you're always looking at the universal threads which bind us as human beings to be reflected in certain kinds of stories, and you look at very local books which are very particular to a space and time and a region and a demography, and both of them really should be made available, in my opinion, in an ideal world, of course.
So you're emphasizing that an ambience should be created, and then, responding to Man's question, so you're just emphasizing that an ambience being created with a lot of photos and a little bit of curation, and then accessibility, and not just included.
If a child is struggling to read but is an older child, then you can just quietly read to that child.
But what in cases where you strongly believe that the value of reading should be passed on to children who come from families or even from schools where reading per se is not emphasized, but you believe that that's a better word?
I absolutely believe that personally.
And I also understand what you said, that it cannot be pushed.
It cannot be pushed upon. Yeah, absolutely. So however strongly I believe in something,
How do you go about emphasizing if you're not trying?
you do the best that you can, and you hope for the best. Is my very very broad answer to that. You can. Mala's a storyteller.
I'll tell you a very personal story. I hope my brother's not around. So as a kid growing up, I had an elder brother, and everything that he possessed came to me. So I lived on hand-me-downs, including the books. So my dad used to read P.G. Wodehouse. My brother used to read P.G. Wodehouse. I started reading them, and we were at a stage when three of us would have three books and giggle, into our own worlds. My younger brother would say, "Oh God, a house full of mad people." He didn't read, and he's a very successful man, very happy man. All right, he's doing great. So you don't have to be a reader, even though you want everyone to be a reader. That's just accept that. I think on that note, we should stop now. Thank you all for being such a patient audience.
Thank you all the panelists, and also beautifully moderated by Malama. It was a very thought-provoking session for us. I kindly request you to accept our love and appreciation to be a part of this panel.